Awesome. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us on a Saturday. I know it's been tough. You guys are working remotely. Even on weekends, you must be working itself. So thank you for actually taking your time out and joining us today. Um, Today we have Krish on call. Of course, I'm going to give us a brief description of who Krish is. But before that, just want to, for everybody's benefit who don't really know who the product folks are, just wanted to mention that the product folks is a volunteer-driven community. We want to ensure that India as a country we can become more product-oriented. We have more product managers coming from this country, but even more than that, we have more entrepreneurs coming from this country. And the way we are trying to do that is by connecting you with folks who've already done that before, right? The best speakers available there, just like Krish himself today, who leads Chargebee. And just to give you a brief intro into Krish's history as such, right? Krish is currently the CEO and co-founder of Chargebee. Even before that, he was a software engineer, worked in TCS Cognizant, and I'm really excited to know how he came up with the idea of Chargebee and started it off as such. So what I'm going to do now is that, of course, I'm going to hand it over to Krish to take it over to speak about the topic of SaaS, scaling up, and of course, how exactly do you go about pricing the product as such. So, Krish, all up to you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining in. I'm Krish, co-founder and Krish Subramanian, co-founder and CEO of Chargebee. Very happy to be here. Beautiful to see a volunteer-driven group that brings together so many people on a Saturday to want to learn. So thanks for joining in. So when I think Nitin from our team and then Akash, they proposed a topic, right? We said, do we want to talk about pricing? But I said, or about the journey. We want to keep the topic a little loose with respect to giving context of the journey. And then we want to keep it a little open-ended with respect to the topics that we can discuss, depending on the audience preference in terms of where you want to take the conversation through. So with that in perspective, I would ideally like to give you a context of the journey and then some parts that would give you more visibility into what went right, what went wrong through different stages for about 20 minutes, and then leave it open for maybe 30 to 40 minutes of conversation. So feel free to anything that is of interest that you can think of, feel free to just drop a question and then we can try and see how to address that quickly. Okay, so with that, I'll start a little bit about the of context and backstory so that we are able to go into specific parts of the discussion. So Chargebee, we started this in 2011. We bootstrapped the company through the first year and a half or more. And before starting Chargebee, I come from software engineering background. Started as a software engineer with a startup, and then worked at TCS for 7.5 years, specialized in mostly product implementations. This product called Ariba suite of products. That is what I used to implement. Then again, another product called Vendavo, but very briefly at Cognizant. But mostly my specialization was working with Fortune 500 customers, global customers, implementing products. Right? That was most of my experience. One of my classmates from engineering days was Raja Raman, and he is also one of the founders, of the 4 founders. Raja Raman, KPS Thiagu, all 3 of them worked at Zoho. And of course, you all know the Zoho journey. We must be familiar, right? All the way from network management products, then transition into cloud-based products from 2005 was what Zoho did. And Raja Raman and I were inspired by one Zoho's journey of creating a small team and then just a kind of organization that was getting built, which allowed people to learn and build confidence that, hey, it's possible for us to actually understand a customer problem, go solve that through code, right? And you also get the opportunity to go and solve a bunch of problems, and they trust you to go talk to customers and do a bunch of things. Building such skills is very interesting. And so through the 10 years of working in different companies, and Radharaman worked, and then I worked at different companies, we used to catch up every few months. And we used to talk about wanting to build a company at some point of time, a product company at some point of time. We just did not know when. So one thing that we did speak about was making sure that we were saving up enough to give ourselves a chance to start a company at some point of time in future. That was something we diligently did to save up and to be able to start. And by 2010, 2011, it was becoming more and more apparent that cloud was taking off. Software was transitioning more into SaaS, and the cost of actually starting a company was drastically, and we felt like this is probably a good time to start. And then we decided to start the company. So the and another inspiration was this company called this blog called Joel on software.com. Joel Spolsky, the founder of these companies, Stack Overflow and Trello, are from the same stable. But Joel Spolsky used to write about his journey in Joel on software.com. I think the job of a founder is to get the chairs out of the way so smart people can come in and solve problems, was something that stuck in the mind all through, to say, okay, we want to figure out what does it take to actually try and start a company. So that's all, right? So with this is the perspective, and then we saved up to give ourselves a chance. So we just decided to quit and start a company. By the time Freshdesk got started, and Rajaraman has been good friends with Shan and Girish, and he either had to make a choice to say, hey, am I going to join them, or are we going to honor our pact? Because that's how we decided to start Chargebee. We quit and start Chargebee, but without an idea, right? Meaning we had some ideas in mind, but we said, okay, this is a team first company. And of course, KPS and Thiago decided to join, and that's how we came together. And the fundamental idea of wanting to build an organization is what drove us, and that is what continues to drive us in terms of the motivations behind how we continue to build Chargebee. Um, and when we started, right, I'll take a couple of minutes to go into why subscription billing, or how we picked it, because I think Akash specifically said touch upon that as a topic. I'll go into that a little bit. When we looked at this, to what idea to start with, one of the ideas was, hey, every SaaS company that is going to build is going to have to do a few things that are operational in nature behind the scenes that they shouldn't have to do. One of the things we looked at was performance management, which is in traditional software, you would write the code, hand it over to the customer, the performance management, everything is their problem, right? Mostly. But in SaaS, you are going to own it, which means that as a developer, when you build it, you have to do all the wiring to know how the latency and the performance of your application is. All of that wiring has to be done, right? Which is today the category where Datadog, AppDynamics, and everybody else thrives in that market. And that's one of the areas we thought we could go into. Another one was single sign-on, where everybody manages login and a bunch of permissions and a lot of other things, which SaaS companies, every company needs it, but most people do not have to do it. So why don't we abstract that through API? Can we solve that problem? Was another one we looked at. And the third one, of course, was recurring payments. And here we are. Right. At that time, I wouldn't say we had this understanding of the problem, nuanced understanding of the problem, or anything like that. It was more of, okay, everybody has to get paid. We have to send tax invoices. And everybody is going to repetitively build this from the start. And then at every stage of growth, you're going to do something other than. And this is suboptimal, right? Which is probably not how it should be. So how can we abstract that through API? So we studied PayPal, all the payment processors at that time, Braintree and a few others. Braintree had subscriptions, but then it is not the subscription management and billing as necessary for you as a foundational piece to scale your business. Like, for example, there is Zora was the only one which was serving enterprises to specialize in what does it take for a company that is starting with a lot of ambition but no customers at the very early stage, but you want the foundational pieces that will allow you to scale and grow through different stages of growth without having to focus much on your core infrastructure, one of the key pieces of the infrastructure. So in hindsight, right, I'm able to imagine why every subscription business now needs this layer, which is becoming more and more important for you to orchestrate your business, because you want to, all the way starting from how you acquire your leads to try your product, the trial management phase, through their activation and cancellation, the churn, everything else. Pretty much there is a touch point with respect to billing and subscription management through everything. And every time you iterate your pricing, your product goes through different phases of growth from one segment to another, or all of that, everything has a touch point with the whole subscription management billing stack. Now we are able to imagine why a Switzerland for billing exists. And I was watching Suresh Doshi's talk that happened previously at Product Folks, and it's fascinating, right? So we have a overlap with Stripe, and we are also partners, and we are also partners with a number of other payment processors, and we look up to a company like Stripe, right? Phenomenal execution as a product company, but the biggest learning is there is always space for companies to coexist and execute beautifully as long as you stay focused on customer problems and understand the larger opportunity. Now we are able to think why a Switzerland, an agnostic system that is a Switzerland for billing, absolutely has a space to scale with companies. Because for a Stripe, building the payment infrastructure and financial infrastructure is the biggest problem and very, very large problem to attack, right? And for us, this is the most important problem, and this is not one of the problems. And for customers, this is a core infrastructure piece that is essential for scaling. And that's how we have learned how to do this. Now, the second part of the conversation I want to touch upon is where we started and how we are heading, because it will give you some context about how we achieve product market fit and how we are actually thinking about different segments of customers that we serve. So, to give a little bit of numbers, today we manage $4 billion of ARR of our customers in 53 countries, serving more than 3,000 paying customers and thousands of freemium customers across what we call as the three segments of customers, right? Startup, scale up, and grow segment, which is defined by the revenue stage, right? The 0 to 1 million, and then till the 25 million, and then the 25 to 250 million or 500 million is the third stage. So this is how we look at it. And early on, we deliberately focused on a lot of early stage customers. You're all product folks, so I'm going to freely talk about, throw in the jargons like segmentation and all of that, right? So when I'm saying revenue based segmentation, it's just revenue based segmentation, right? Early on when we started, we really did not think too much about industry specific segmentation at all. The vertical was not in our mind, because every time you start a product company, any product, or introduce a product to the market, what we look for is a wedge in the market, right? A space, an unmet need in the market, and you believe that you can be the most important. There is a problem that is not solved by existing players, and the customers are like feeling the pain, and there is a crying need for something, and that is very sharp, and you go and hit that wedge, and then you expand using that, and then create the market opportunity, right? That is how it starts. If you put this in context, you think about it, subscription billing is important for every business that's starting out, but every payment processor was giving a little bit of subscription API, but not enough. Doesn't provide tax management and then invoicing, and a lot of all the bells and whistles that are necessary that a pure play SaaS company needs. Right? And that was our wedge and an opportunity with which we started. But if you start with that as an opportunity, but that opportunity also continues to grow, that's beautiful. But if you start with one opportunity and then if you go into multiple other segments, that is also a different way of scaling the business. So for us, we were able to identify this as a core opportunity. We started a little broad to try and think about, okay, there were e-commerce subscriptions, there is also SaaS subscriptions, and then a number of other markets. But we started with the understanding of SaaS as a market, but we also looked at several verticals across geographies, but all small businesses, right? The 0 to 5 million stage companies mostly as our primary customer. And then from there, we went, I call this phase wandering, right? Where we wandered around with the hundreds of customers, but a number of metrics look bad, continue to look bad, which is you get leads and then a lot of people come in, activate, and then you find that only a small number of people continue to grow with you. And then a lot of them activate, they grow to some extent, they churn out, and then you find the reasons are different reasons. They will say, some will say pricing is high, some will say, no, I'm not, this was an experiment for me in the business, I'm no longer doing subscriptions. And some will say, you don't have enough features, or I need everything to be configurable, I cannot do everything with the API, and so on and so forth. And this 3.5 years of wandering was a huge learning phase for us to try and understand what is actually working and what's not working, right? And to get our focus. And in this phase, these customer conversations are helpful. The focus on markets. The third one is pricing, because pricing is a huge, very important filter in knowing who finds your product attractive. You price it too high, most of the market will ignore you. You price it too low, most of the market will find you attractive. That is also bad. I'll give you an example. If you price it at a $49 or $29 product, what will happen is even agencies which are having 10 clients, they won't even call them customers, they would call them clients. They would also find you attractive because $29, they will compare you against, in the case of ours, instead of a recurring subscription management and billing, without emphasis on subscription management and billing, they'll be comparing us against a recurring invoicing system, like a fresh books. The moment the comparison happens against a completely different type of a product where they are thinking invoicing and recurring invoicing, set up 10 customers, 10 clients, and then invoice them repeatedly. And anytime something changes, I want to go edit the invoice. That's basically how they would think about it. They are not thinking non-linear growth of a product or a service that would grow phenomenally well, and I need the automation layer for billing is not what they are looking for. They are looking for something else to automate with just 10 invoices. But the problem is, because you price too low, they are going to find you attractive. They are going to ask for different types of invoice templates, different types of ways to send the email. All features which are valid for their use case probably will be absolutely useless for you to actually address subscription management use cases. This pricing as a filter is such a powerful force, and but it's very hard to get it right straight away. So we went through a series of iterations, including freemium, couple of iterations of freemium, and what we have now is a freemium tier for the $0 to $100,000 customers. The first $100,000 of invoicing, right? Let me phrase it correctly. First $100,000 of invoicing free, then followed by, when it's deliberately a limited freemium, so that people know that at some point you're going to pay for this product, right? And we don't want them to mistake us as a free product at all. So it's a $100,000 of aggregate invoicing free. Then you cross the threshold, then you move into one of the paid tiers. There is also an intermediate tier, then the listed pricing, which starts from the $299 per month, and then so on and so forth. All of that exists. We started from the product driven model, or the inside sales model, which is starting from people coming to the website, signing up, and going live. So the initial persona was mostly CEOs, CTOs, or the first developer of any startup coming in, signing up, and going live. And when these companies started growing, what we also saw was something very interesting, which is the users or the system started changing, which is some of the operations people. When the company hit the $5 million stage and all of that, there was a director of finance or somebody else who was coming in. The person managing it became a product manager or an operations person. And when the company grew, some of the companies went into tens of millions of dollars. We also saw the VP of sales coming in, playing a huge role from, let's say, our customer being a credit card driven self-service customer, like how Fresh Desk started. And eventually, by the time they became Freshworks into multi-product company and started scaling, they also had sales-driven workflows and all of that. So different stages brings in different user personas as a product. That's one line of complexity, one vector of complexity. The second vector of complexity was us serving the small customers, and then our product is already beginning to serve the larger and larger customers, but we were acquiring only small customers. But 3 years back, we made a conscious decision to also move upmarket from the go-to-market perspective, which is to get the customers when they're already at 5 million, 10 million, 25 million, 100 million, and so on, right? So the moment you start doing it, the selling motion changes, the go-to-market motion changes. It's not the customers who grew with you with the product, but rather somebody who already has built an in-house system that works for them to scale to wherever they are. How do I then migrate them in? What kind of a support and service do we need to offer to see if we match everything that they need today and also for the future? Now the selling can no longer be self-service, right? You cannot leave it to chance for them to evaluate how the Chargebee is supposed to work for their needs, because an individual product manager who is evaluating Chargebee may not know all the business use cases, because it's more like setting up an IT system for the entire organization, and it's not a point solution for one department. Like help desk, you would imagine it's a specific solution for one department, which is the support group. Or a customer success product is for customer success as a group. But billing cuts across the needs of different organizations, all the way from a CRM integration to product integration through payment integration and then accounting integration, and then like so many other different use cases that come up. And we are somewhere in the middle of all of this. Now, with this in context, what happened was our organization started changing into having pre-sales to support the sales motion, and then pre-sales got divided into pre-sales and implementation. Now implementation has professional services and implementation, and product as a group did not exist when we started as founders, because we thought this is one thing that I would actually definitely change if I could go back, right? You would think that now we can play the product role, right? And we bring context from customers, and then you would actually do a bunch of things, and you have a hunch, and then you have that confidence to think you understand the customer problems, and then we make certain decisions, we build product. But the challenge of actually scaling a company is when product engineering, everything is intertwined. The support system, that is when a founder goes into, let's say, a customer demo, right? What we actually, the hats we wear is, or a product manager goes into a customer call to sell. What do? You can demonstrate the product. You know the use cases in and out. You also know where the product is heading. So you know what to promise, what not to promise, and you can even make some decisions about, should I be building this. You can wear all these hats while actually being on a demo, right? The founder and the product manager are very similar if you are in a customer conversation. Whereas you put a specialized salesperson in front of a customer, suddenly you'll think that the salesperson sucks, but it's actually, that's not the case, right? The salesperson needs the right support system to be able to articulate the value prop, understand the customer problem, and also know the features in and out, right? And how do you then scale the business in a way that you can have more salespeople? Then all these functions become important in a scale up phase of an organization, and the product management as a group becomes the glue to support this. So in the context of the founders actually transitioning into this, right, one of the first challenges we faced was separating the accountability within, who's responsible to ensure that we are delivering the right things necessary for the revenue growth of the organization, right? Because the moment you wear your engineering hat and your product hat, you start thinking from your bandwidth perspective and not from the organization growth perspective, right? And pretty much all the other priorities of the product. That's why the separation of duties becomes very, very important, to allow somebody to be accountable for various stakeholders as a glue in the entire organization. And that was the first layer of separation that happened. And then we were still in the startup mode of actually having established product market fit, but still there is so much that was going on, and we had not even embarked on the upmarket move. And then the subsequent phase was, by the time you actually get here, you have the probably $1 million or $3 million of revenue ARR, and then the baggage of, see, the advantage of actually the early stages, you can travel with a lot more lightness in terms of customer commitments. The moment you hit the first 1 to 3 million, the reason why a lot of companies get stuck in that 1 to 5 million journey is the decisions we made 2 years earlier, where the counterintuitive things to focus on. When I said we would be more broad when it comes to acquiring customers, to suddenly the same things like multiple verticals, and across many things, trying to do many things becomes the burden, becomes a baggage for the subsequent step. So by the time we got there, we had sharpened our focus to say, let's focus on B2B SaaS, let's scale that before we actually commit ourselves to other additional verticals and additional segments and so on. So we let go of a lot of other things to do. From a focus perspective, we said, okay, let's focus on 0 to 1 million, 1 to 10 million customers, and that's it. And then support most of the use cases necessary for our growing customers, and let the product be pulled by our fastest growing customers, while go to market stayed focused on one segment. And we did that, and that allowed us to learn a bunch of things, and also the mistakes that we made previously in our product decisions, like architectural decisions with respect to, let's say, how we built our invoicing engine, not building a credit note engine early on, right? And a bunch of other things like accounting standards and then integration framework and things like that came back to bite us. Then we had to pay off the product debt in between, and that is when product started playing a huge role to, from a founder-led product that had reasonable product market fit, to getting this ready for the subsequent stage of growth started happening when there were specialists who could, one, give us a confidence that you can scale the business through revenue. Second is also take care of figuring out how to pay off the product debt while laying the foundation for the subsequent years. All these packed learnings started happening, and that is the role our product team plays today, to be able to do all of this. And that specialization means you also start separating the duties of engineering, design, and then product becomes a glue between pre-sales, sales, customer success, and engineering, playing this entire orchestration role, and customer support, right? And playing the orchestrated role across all of this, while balancing all of this with customer conversations, right? While you, and there are different types of organizations. I think Shreyas talked about it last in his talk previously, Shreyas Doshi, about the customer first companies, product first companies, and companies. And similarly, I have this hypothesis that there are companies that listen a lot to sales, right? And then some that listen a lot to customers, right? But you also need to balance that with your own definition of how you want the vision of where you want the product to go, to define the category or differentiate it in your own way, right? How you think about it. And this balance and transfer, where you are bringing in specialists who are trying to absorb and do all of this while juggling all these balls is the hardest part of the scale up journey, is one of my biggest learning. And the role of a product manager again evolves through all of this. I'll cut this short in the next 5 minutes. I'll wrap this up in 5 minutes. The the role of a product manager, from the person who is actually actually there is not much of analytical work at all in the early stage, right? You actually have hypothesis and you validate, talk to a lot of customers, and then you do a lot of product work. It's execution and product work. And then subsequently what happens is the phase where you do the counterintuitive thing of letting go of a lot of things and focusing on fewer things to actually set your organization for long term scale. And that means the analytical phase comes into play, where you want to understand pretty much everything about, like, who's using the product, who are your best paying customers, and who are your best paying customers and what features do they value, doing more customer interviews, and becoming the champion of knowing the exact customer problem. So the role of a product manager especially becomes more and more specialized, where you know the best about articulating the customer problem more than anything else. There are going to be a lot of people who can come up with solutions, including your design team, engineering team, and that is how it should be. But somebody should be able to articulate the problems beautifully in a way that you really assimilate not just one customer problem. You're not building a service or a solution. You're trying to build a product, which means that you need to build understanding of the market and representation of the customer's problems, and become the champion to bring that to the table and solve the problem with everybody else. The moment the product manager thinks, I know the solution as well, and that's where it becomes more difficult, right? Where you are then leaving the advantage of actually involving the designers and everybody else into the conversation, right? So this specialization happens during the scale up phase, and that's something that we are going through. Um, I think this part of the conversation, if you want to talk more about it, I'm happy to answer questions into any of these parts. I think one more context that may be helpful is this high growth environment, right? What does it do to product managers? When I see, it's a thankless job when it comes to doing most things through influence, and yet being able to support the organization in a way that you are able to support this high growth. Because the moment you solve for growth, a lot of other problems can be solved. It creates the cushion for the organization to create a lot more leeway into doing more things. And that is what happens in a high growth environment. When I say high growth environment, anywhere from 50% year on year to there is early stage. If you're at $1 million, then 200% of year on year, 100% year on year growth could be high growth. But the way we have scaled is, went from the first million, took a lot of time. Then from 1 to 5, we did it in 4 quarters, and then from no, actually 5 quarters, and then 5 to 10 in 4 quarters, and 10 to 20 in 4 quarters, and so on and so forth. And then we have been continuing to scale that way, right? And that's a high growth path. And this stretches the organization because you're also trying to move up market into different sales motion that you're figuring out for larger and larger customers, while continuing to serve the smaller customers. We are not vacating the entry level, right? We actually are doubling down in product led growth and other things in the early segment while moving up market. And product definition of what a product manager did, owning a feature, module, and a product, to now specializing in individual modules and trying to figure out how do I simplify this in a way that this allows the organization to scale, is what is now happening, where the role of a product is now evolving, and I'm still learning a lot of things about how this is continuing to take shape in terms of new initiatives that we are trying to do, new product lines that we are trying to introduce, while we are specializing this core product to keep it simple for early stage while adding sophistication for later stage, right? The best example is Salesforce. I don't know how they did it, but even after 22 years, right, it's phenomenal to see. Yes, the product is ugly, that's different, but look at how they scale, right? From the smallest of customers, a single person, 2-member product salesperson can start using it, and 20,000 salespeople can use it. Somewhere the marketplace and integrations and everything else came in, and then they left money on the table so that SI partner system integrators could actually make money. Everything is enabled by product, right? And there's a thinking process behind all of this to enable partners, the ecosystem, while you are scaling the revenue and you are scaling the product for this whole range of customers. And that's beautiful to see, right? How do we still do that elegantly, taking all the best lessons from somebody like that while scaling this organization to serve larger and larger customers, is one of the biggest challenges. that's a little hard to solve, and especially because it's also nature of the product is billing, and there is absolutely no room for mistakes, right? That makes it all a lot more challenging. Um, but at the same time, I think Shreyas touched upon something very interesting, which is you don't want the product first to be misunderstood within the organization as a power structure. It shouldn't be, because that is a recipe for disaster the moment that happens, because then people will build like will transfer responsibility to product to solve for everything. Instead, what we need is an integrated organization where everybody is solving the customer problem, but the context of the problem is brought by the product manager. Just like how a founder brings a lot of market context and the hunch of where you want to go, is the role the product manager should play, where you bring a lot of context to the table and enable everybody to solve the problem together. Is how I imagine the role of the product team continues to evolve in the context of every organization as you continue to scale. I think, yeah. So other than that, we are also venture funded. We raised more than $105 million of capital, but we've been very scrappy from the beginning as a company, and we now have more than 500 people, but I think 400 plus people are in India. I think 450, about 50 people now in US, and then math is wrong. And then about 20 people in Europe, 50 people in US, and then the rest of the people all over India now, and of course 2-3 people in Australia, but mostly a distributor team after COVID. And another I think aspect that actually drives the learning, because learning for us comes from serving more and more SaaS companies. It's an interesting vantage point from which we see companies getting built from around the world. Right? It's a front row seat to see how companies are getting built and also scaling. So that we are very grateful for. So that in a gist is the context of our journey and what we have been going through. I'm going to stop and let you ask questions and let the audience guide the rest of the conversation.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much for that, Krish. I think it was a wonderful talk. Briefly summarizing it, it was great to know the organization building structure, how you use the product, and build the product and then scaled along with it. Letting the customer actually pull the product in the right direction as such, and finally then talk about pricing as well, right? So yeah, thank you so much for that. And you're right. I think we had a discussion even before that. You wanted audience to drive this, so let's jump straight into what questions they have as well. Even before the talk, we had sourced a few questions for you, so I think we'll take 3 or 4 questions from there, and then we'll jump right into the live questions that
Sure.
the audience has asked.
Sure.
Wonderful, perfect. So one of the questions that they had was, the audience had was essentially that Chargebee has ensured that the Indian SaaS as such, right? It's there on the global map to see. And a part of it is what you mentioned on the ideation phase. But just wanted to know, because as far as your background is concerned, you were a software engineer, TCS, Cognizant, and then you started Chargebee directly. But how did you guys come up with the idea of subscription billing? I mean, was it even remotely related to any of the 4 founders, or was it something that
No, the
you
context
went
of
to the
that.
market research and finally understood?
Okay, so it was driven by understanding how SaaS products are getting built. Right, so 3 of them had been part of that. So I think for us, the transition to SaaS was software to SaaS was happening. Right, that was clear. Then movement towards subscription was also happening, but we just did not know how fast it's accelerating. Right now, we know that pretty much everybody is trying to become some kind of a recurring revenue business. Even translation services. Right? The fascinating thing that I'm finding is there is almost negligible difference between the behavior of a SaaS company and a service company that is trying to become a SaaS company. Like one of the customers is a translation service for all the TV networks. Imagine you are having an English language program and you want to actually stream that in Europe. You need dubbing and all of that, right? How do you then do that? You need translation service. It used to be very manual service related work. Now it's becoming annual contract based work, API driven work, where there are so many AI based natural language algorithms have gotten better. Now they are able to do so much of this automation, and it's all of that is becoming service as a software, not software as a service, but service as software. Now the transformation is beautiful to see. We did not foresee some of that early on, but we understood the stack, right, where the role of this particular stack is, and we were very conscious about wanting to build for SMBs, because at that time because that is what we understood really well, not enterprises. Because I come from enterprise world, but other three come from building for smaller companies, and it's also the constraint of building from India, right? We were sitting in Chennai, a bootstrap company. We had no intention of flying and then like meeting and greeting customers to sell, right? Because we would run out of money then. So we decided to just bootstrap the company from here. Naturally, the inbound was the way, and automatically inbound acquisition through Google AdWords and SEO, SEM, or the natural constraint. So, which means that you hone in on a segment of customers. We just studied the market, right? Just by reading up more about it, because subscription management stack we understood, the payment stack we decided to partner, which is why we don't look at ourselves as a payments company at all. We are not a payments company. We are a SaaS specialist, right? Building for similar SaaS companies and subscription business is how we look at it, and we have stayed true to that strength rather than trying to become a payments company. Because the moment you become a payments company, the DNA is very different: risk assessment, risk management, banking, and a lot of other things, right? We work very closely. Dangerous. We know enough to be dangerous about payments, but we would rather leave it to the specialists like Stripe and Braintrees of the world and PayPal's of the world. We focus on this. That was a clear decision. And I think there is enough material out there in the web for us to actually know enough about any customer problem, right? Hanging out in customer forums, picking up the phone, talking to people. In the absence of I think if people are starting today, one of the things I recommend is don't write code. Just talk to as many customers as possible. Do your customer interviews. Try and understand what are the tools they use, what are the other products they use, who else is using it. Right? Do your homework before starting. We did not do any of that. Sorry, I'm just advising. This is what I would change if we were to start all over again. Um, Before you start, right? But we just got, how do I put it, lucky in some sense, because the context of 10 years of work experience allowed us to pick a problem. We probably naturally understood certain things. But if you are somebody who's starting, do your homework at least 3 to 6 months to understand your market customers better before picking a problem. But I don't think you really need to be a specialist in any of the particular areas before you start. I don't believe in that. Anything can be learned.
Krish, I have a question for you.
Yes, Nitin.
Why VC funding over bootstrapping? And how easy or difficult was it for you in the early stages to raise funding? Because at that point in time, SaaS wasn't so prevalent. It was probably
Yeah.
a very early idea.
Yeah.
How easy or difficult was it?
First time founders, right? We had made enough first time founder mistakes. Thankfully, enough good decisions to survive the mistakes. But what we realized early on was we come from a very different world, right? Especially the three other founders from Zoho. They come from a very different world, bootstrap world, where you just act as if you have money forever. That's actually not the case, right? Opportunity doesn't exist forever. Your money doesn't last forever, right? There is a cost to the mental fatigue that might hit you if you don't figure out things, right? And that's very normal human behavior. Um, so we didn't take money from Axel very quickly. Actually, we knew them for a year before we raised money. We actually did not go into a fundraise mode at all. It was more of a natural evolution of conversation because Axel had invested in Freshdesk, and it's investor's job to always ask, okay, which other teams are good teams are building products, and then they happened to mention us and then introduced us. And every time Shekhar, he would come to meet Girish and Freshworks team. I would catch up with him over breakfast, right? Sometimes two, three of us, or sometimes me alone, and he would just grill us about the problem, like asking first principles questions, like why do you exist, right? Who's evaluating you? Why are they evaluating you? All the first principles question, really boring questions, but you really need to figure out early on, because we tend to jump to impressing people, which is through numbers, like this is working, that is working, all the stories. Good thing is we did not want to have any intention of raising, and we enjoyed just the first principles questions were making us think harder to think, okay, are you going to become a payments company? Are you going to become a SaaS company, right? And if Freshdesk, why is Freshdesk not using you today, right? And then when Freshdesk started using us, by the time they started asking, like, why are they using? At what point will they actually leave you, right? Why? At what point will it make sense for them to have their own developers to build it? Because how complex is the problem that you cannot hack it over a weekend, or is it actually complex enough with enough layer of sophistication that this can last? The moment these questions challenged our assumptions, because as first time founders, we did not give enough importance to sitting down and talking about many of these things. We just jumped in like engineers and then started solving problems, right? And that is also bad, right? Because don't give enough importance to these kind of conversations. But suddenly a stakeholder outside makes you, challenges you about all these questions and makes you think better. They elevates a conversation completely to a different level, and we could see the importance of this. So we said, hey, and I really liked working with them. Like, Subrat, one of the partners at Axel who invested in Flipkart, was kind enough to actually do a 45-minute, more than 1 hour whiteboarding session with me to try and understand the landscape completely, right? And just these kind of paying it forward things really helped us think about the benefit of actually having somebody who will hold us accountable and can also shape our thoughts. Because the more we understood the problem, we understood that this is actually a much, much larger problem than what we imagined, and potential is possibly huge. Then how do we tap into it, right? That's when we decided to take money from Axel, and no returns there because they've been amazing to shape the thoughts. But the subsequent rounds of funding, very naturally, once you get on the path towards actually taking venture capital, then you stay committed to it, right? Otherwise, take the angel funding or something else before. I think now there are lot more options between bootstrapping it and funding. It's not a either or choice, right? Now there are a lot more options to say you can bootstrap, even with very friendly angels who put in a little bit more money. No pressure to necessarily take venture capital, and then you hit a certain point of clarity. You can choose to either bootstrap your way to profitability, or you can, if you think there is a path to actually building a company that can scale, you can also do that. There are more options. And another aspect I would add is the benefit of see, everything comes with learning, right? It's a humbling experience where you go through enough. Even with venture capital, you will go through those moments of truth when it will feel like the survival, fight for survival, and all of those things happen. That's different. But at the same time, a high-paced growth environment, what it does in learning is the packed learning of what you're actually trying to do, and the constraint of actually this upmarket move while balancing early stage customer and all of those things. We wouldn't try that if we were to say, okay, let's focus on this one segment and we are happy to take salary home, and then it's okay for us to bootstrap a small company. There is nothing wrong with it. We could also build it, but we might never go through the learning that we are going through. And the reason why we started was to learn how to build a good global product company, right? And every time you see better colleagues, smarter colleagues who join us, who have been through different types of company organizations and join us, it's an enriching experience. And all of that happens because we took venture capital, right? So everything's different in different types of companies, but the reason for us was learning and tapping into the market opportunity and somebody to challenge us and shape our thought process, because we have made first time founder mistakes and we didn't want to get stuck in that place. So the learning also drove that along with market opportunity.
Beautiful. A related question from the audience, Divya Jain. You were talking about not raising funding in the initial days and then eventually going on to Axel and raising money. But how much money did you save up initially? A ballpark number will help in understanding, at least in the Indian context, what is a
Okay.
good enough number
I
to
think
save up?
the money part, I think, will change significantly, because if you think about staying alone, paying rent, right? All of that has changed completely from then versus now. Um, one of the rule of thumb that we used to have is saving one third of our salary straight away. Just put it in some savings instrument, treating it as not our money. Anytime salary increases, again, make sure that one third is always saved into mutual funds, equity, and all those things, PF and everything else, and that just continues to grow in value is what we did for a sustained period. I think, I worked outside of India, so I had enough to at least partially pay off a loan of a house and all of that stuff. And I was married and had a kid, so my expenses were very different, right? And living alone, not with parents. But if you are someone who's still a bachelor and then living with parents and all of that, you can live forever, man. Whereas you can keep building a company for a very long time with almost no spend. All three others were bachelors then. The other three founders, I would say, I had 15 lakhs of liquid money that I could actually pull off from different places, and then I had access to my. And the thing is, I thought this will last for 2.5 years or so, but I realized that very quickly. Realized in the first year itself that no, this is going to last another 6 more months. Right, everything is going to get over in 18 months, and I was getting scared about kids schooling because he was already 2 years, and then I was like, oh no no no. This is going to get tricky where either I'll have to make a choice between staying in Chargebee or going back to work, and that would screw up all the plan. And this was all in decision for us. So, for me, it was easier to make the decision to just sell off the apartment and then take that money, put it in the bank, and then tell my wife, "Don't worry about it for another 2 3 years. We'll figure out." Right. Worst case, I go back to job. We'll earn it by the time I'm 40, so it's fine. That is what happened for me personally. But I think anywhere between, if you think runway wise, I think about your own expenses and think runway. Don't change your lifestyle. One advice, word of advice is don't change your lifestyle. Right? If you're used to, let's say, second days you train, and then at least economy in like short distance you are used to flying and all of that. Don't change lifestyle for your family, especially if you're in a job and then you have certain lifestyle. Don't change from suddenly cars to bikes because you'll start feeling guilty about changing, making them go through suffering. So whatever is the lifestyle, try and diminish the expenses. Try and see if you can have enough for a 24 to 36 months runway, at least 24 months, right? Ideally 36 months if you squeeze enough. But we are all smart enough to actually figure out things if you stay for 36 months to actually know whether it's working, not working, or find something that's working. All of that is possible, and there are enough options now. If you're a good team and solving a good problem, there is enough money available as angel, seed round, and all of that. That is all possible today in the market. So the way I would imagine, I would recommend any of you who wants to venture out is think at least 2 to 3 years, 2.5 years in savings to do that. This is specifically Indian context, right? Mileage varies by country, by your lifestyle, all of that. But I would say keep this in mind.
Thank you, Krish. Krish, we spoke about the funding angle. Let's talk about how you managed to get your first 5 employees on board and the first 5 customers on board. What was the
Uh,
experience like?
okay. The first 5 employees. So because we come from the three others had enough tech experience under their belt to know they can build it, right? First hire was a designer that we hired, who stayed with us for the first 4 years of the journey. This was 6 months into, no, 1 month into starting, we hired the designer. And then 6 months later was when we started hiring developers. We actually went for freshers because this is a school we come from, right? Which is the three others come from Zoho, and Zoho is used to hiring freshers and then training them on the job and all of that. And they were comfortable with doing that. And we were ready to do the investment. So the first few hires were all people straight out of college, and I think Vaibhav leads our. He has done a bunch of different things, and now is focusing on one of the important problems for us, which is custom engineering. He was the first developer hire. Ajit continues to work in frameworks right after the core product. So we play to our strengths, which is hiring from college. We even wrote down the criteria for how we would actually train them, like creating 1 month of every day one problem exercise to train them on the code, and then features, how to get them to start fixing bugs, and then building feature. So there was a plan, and one of the founders took the responsibility to train people on this curriculum. Right, by the time they finish the 45 days to 60 days, we know that they'll be ready to start shipping features. So we just played to our strength because we bootstrapped. We couldn't pay more than at that time what we started salary at probably 21,000 or something like that for them, and then very quickly within 6 months we'll then bump it up to 25,000 per month. Then like and so on and so forth is what we did. Right, whatever works for you, right? Because you have to find your own watering hole how to do it. In fact, I remember KPS even did. I think went to an institute to do training in Java to somebody for 1 day or 2 days kind of workshop, and that got us some 50,000 rupees or something like that per day for his training because he comes from 10 years of product, 12 years of product building experience, and they were willing to pay that. And by doing it, we found that they also do outplacement, and we found the best people there, and that's how we recruited these people from those places, right? So you find your own watering hole because it looked like there is too much competition. How do I find the right talent to complement me? How do I find the team and all of that? But playing to our strengths and finding the right watering holes to actually look for that. There's always so much talent out here, right? But it's a question of looking in the right places to that suits our own way of building the company. And we were working out of an apartment first, and then by the time we recruited, we moved to Freshworks first office, Freshdesk first office. They vacated that. We took over that. But imagine this: this is above a hardware shop in Kilkatlai, in one of the places, right? And then there's no ID card, nothing. So you also want the right people who will actually say, yes, I'm okay with actually coming here, who don't care about many of these things, but they value the people that they get to work with. Because if you go and hire from people who are used to, let's say, working in a IT environment and like different things, the startup culture today is much better, right? Where there is so much weightage given to wanting to start up. But I'm talking about 8, 9 years back when there is still stigma associated. I still remember by the time in another 6 months we moved to SP Infocity, some of the early hires brought their parents to check the office before they would actually get people to work. So all of that happened for the employee side. Customers, we mostly recruited them in different forums. I remember Flavorbox is one of the early customers. Um, Quora is another place where we found some customers, like Times Box TV. At that time, they tried building the Netflix for India. I think Satyan Gajwani of Times, he looked at my Quora post, then referred Pandurang, who was the product manager of Box TV, and then referred him to look at Chargebee, and then we spoke, and that's how they became one of the early paying customers for us. Flavorbox found them in forum where the customer, I think Sebastian Powell, the founder, was specifically talking about building on top of PayPal Pro and how do I manage recurring billing. And then I went in and offered help to say this is how you set it up. But if you're interested, here is what we are doing. Sign up for the beta. This is the link. And then so every time in the absence of a solution, what's the solution for you? The absence of our product, offer the help and then leave a note with the link. And then they would actually click on that sign up. And then we accumulated the first 300, 400 signups before even launch. So by the time we launched, we were able to reach out to these 300, 400 people, jump on calls, get them to talk, and then found the first 10, 20 people who would be the best fit for that early iterations is how we recruited our early customers. I think right now, Rocket Lane, Sri Krishna, right, who's building the company second time, he's doing a phenomenal job in customer interviews and he's building in the open, right? Follow him on Twitter if you would like. And he's building a community first before while they are still solving the problem. That's a very good way to do that. In hindsight, that is what I wish I had done.
Quite. So, Krish, again, another question from the audience here. So, when you were building your product initially, you must have received a lot of customer requests as such. How did you prioritize that this is something that you have to build versus this is something that you can open up to the marketplace so that someone from the outside can build for you? So, what was?
We still don't have a marketplace, right? I think let's be clear. We do have some more than 40 plus integrations,
Okay.
but we don't have a marketplace. But at the same time, see, analytics is a classic example of a close overlap, which we are offering. Right. Earlier, we used to offer only dashboard, and then we built an analytics product. Then we integrated that revenue story into the core of the product and all of that. While doing all of this, we are still friends with Profitwell, Patrick Campbell, as well as Nick Franklin, Chartmogul, and also now Barometrics. All of them have integrated. Right. The two others, the Chartmogul and Profitwell, known the founders for a very long time, and I openly, even before they built the integration on top of Chargebee, and we were very transparent, right? At some point, this may become very important for us, and we don't want to leave this out as not building. But at the same time, we are going to be building this for Chargebee and not as an agnostic solution, right? So they are going to be specialized, just like the relationship that we share with Stripe. We were comfortable with them having that, doing that. So having open, transparent conversations like these have been very helpful to know customers need this, and it's much better that somebody else solves the problem as the most important problem because our focus is on something else. While it's a close adjacency, it's very tempting to say I'm also going to build that and keep it closed. But the problem is your solution, eventual solution for the customer is not complete. Right. So having that openness and confidence to allow others to build on top, opening up the API, all of that was very important. So we were able to do that. Second thing, when it comes to prioritization, I remember some early mistakes as well as one of the things that I think KPS taught me about. I come from services world, right? And it's very tempting to think solutions first. And I think I take a lot of pride in thinking I can come up with solution, but that's also the biggest problem as well when it comes to building the right product. A case in point is address. When it comes to structured data, where somebody is pushing address into, I'm going to go specifics. When somebody is actually pushing storing address of shipping address or a billing address in Chargebee, right? This is just an address, and a lot of customers were like pounding the table to say, "Hey, you're giving me billing address. Why are you not giving me like more than one shipping address? I want more shipping address." But then we had structured it in a way that you can store the same things, like 4 or 5 fields as one address, a shipping address, another one as billing address, and so on. And then we just built it that way initially based on what we thought was it. And suddenly customers are asking like one more address or several addresses. And I went to KPS frustrated, like so many customers are asking, why are you not building it? Like it's just address, more fields. Just why don't you just add it? And then KPS took the time to whiteboard this for me to say, hey, and he was getting frustrated that I'm again and again asking. He said, the reason I'm not, it might look easy for you. And the customer is saying it's easy. But the problem is if you just put it as unstructured data as shipping address 1, shipping address 2, and so on, what happens subsequently is your API becomes more complex. The moment you want to open it up for the customer side implementation, it will become very cluttered the way you are not consuming an object to say an address object of type billing address or shipping address, and an address is supposed to have this a contact ID and then like bunch of other information, email ID, and then your street address and all of that stuff. That's a structured data. The moment you make that into an object and then associate that and define how that association works beautifully, suddenly your API becomes a lot more elegant. And then how your customer implements it and how your partners can implement it will become a lot more clear. Otherwise, they have to consume this data, then they have to write a lot of CRUD code to parse it, process it, and do it. Imagine thousands of customers doing it, and that is how APIs become ugly.
Got it.
So if you want this to be like beautiful, it's very important to know which feature to prioritize and how to prioritize it, right? And think product first and not just jump into solutioning, right? So this is where I think Girish Freshworks says this beautifully. Understand the customer problem, ignore the solution. And this is a classic example, and also appreciating the importance of building things beautifully in the API and learning to abstract it, not just thinking in terms of the immediate solution for that one use case, but also about the partners. And all of us are building SaaS products in the open API ecosystem. And your job is not just features and cool little like nice looking buttons, right? It's about crafting this APIs and the product that can scale to thousands of customers and partners, and also system integrators who are able to build on top of this, and so on and so forth. And to be able to do that, you need to make that long-term decision of thinking really hard and writing things down and allowing others to debate that idea and build on top of this. I think this is where I think the very strong product background and respecting the engineer's perspective to make the decision in the product side of things plays a huge role when it comes to how to learn to build better products. It's not just about the customer problem alone, but there is this extremely important voice of thinking about APIs and the long-term design aspects. Those play a huge role. But the other things like which feature to build, which feature not to build, and then you have so much time, which one to build, all of those are easy, right? You can decide by revenue, potential, and number of customers and all of that. Those are easier, tangible ones.
Awesome. That's actually beautiful, Krish. Thank you so much for that. I think we've also run out of time now, almost. So, I know you guys have a lot of questions. There are so many questions there in the Q&A section. But because we've kind of run out of time, we just stick to last rapid fire, Krish, and then we can close. And maybe if it's okay with you, we can have all the questions shared with you probably on some other medium where folks can reach out to you, and you can take it from there. We have a bunch of entrepreneurs as well, who started up, who've received funding, who are in the early stages, who really require your help.
Sure.
Perfect. So going into the rapid fire, this is something that Suhas does generally. His mic is a little off today, so that's the reason I'm doing it as such. First question: 3 early stage startups that you're excited about.
I think I mentioned Rocket Lane already. Another customer of ours. I forgot the name of the company. Matt Weinzig. He's building this beautiful company out in the open. And as product managers, I think all of you should pay attention to his Twitter timeline. Let me look up very quickly. I think Matt Matt Wensing, MattWensing. He's building it out in the open. I think that is a beautiful playbook. Use Summit is a company. I really like them. Of course, Army, because it's so relevant for the world that we live in, right? These kind of conferences are now coming into the living room. Otherwise, we would actually, even the scheduling and when we would do it, all of that changes. Right? So these are 3 companies that comes immediately to mind.
Awesome. Next question for you. 3 books that you would recommend to anybody.
Messy Middle, definitely for all the product managers.
Okay.
I think Shay has mentioned the other one, right? Which is I think 7 Habits book, but Influence is also another book which is very related about the product manager's role as influencers. I think if it's from my reading list, I would say another one is what is that? Lee Kuan Yew's From Third World to First World is a very, very interesting one in my opinion. because it gives a lot of hope, right? Because we all tend to get drowned out in
I'm not sure.
the challenges, but the way Singapore was built is beautiful case study. I really like it. Moments of Truth by Jan Carlson, Krlzon. Moments of Truth. This is about the from the CEO of SAS Airline. It's a very short book, but it's about paying attention to customers and how you build an organization, even something like an airline, built customer first, right at the center of your decisions. Jan Carlson's Moments of Truth.
Got it. Got it. Perfect. And last question for you. I think part of it you've already answered, but three folks that you really want to give a shout out to, and that others should also definitely follow
Yeah.
to learn from.
So Matt Wensing, Wemattwensing, definitely. And then Harry Hurst for the Hustle Pipe founder. Um, then Dan Rose, Amazon, one of the ex-Amazon people who writes amazingly about some of the early stories. Today, I think he published about AWS, which is beautiful. The backstories are really interesting to read. Should read it. Kevin Lee, who used to be an investor. Kevin Lee, the ID is Kevin Leeme. Kevin Lee Me. That's his ID on Twitter. Follow him. He's now building something else, which is food product. IMMI. He just launched it. But his framing and storytelling is really engaging and good. So definitely follow. That's all.
Got it.
Awesome.
Akash? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Am I
Sorry, yes.
still echoing?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
you're good.
Anyways, yeah. Thank you so much, Krish. I think the best part was that I just asked you one question, and you would tell me, you would answer five other questions at the same time. So I think that was the best thing ever.
Not at all.
I guess,
Context helps.
yeah, we have, so I want to hear so much more from you. I think we run out of time. Um,
No problem.
uh,
Right. So
yeah.
my
So I
Twitter
guess we've not.
handle is, sorry, I think there is a lag. My Twitter handle is CB Krish, Charlie Bravo Krish. So CB Krish is my handle. So feel free to hit me or krish at chargebee.com. That's my email ID. Feel free to reach out. I'll do my best to respond to emails.
Awesome.
Thank you. Excellent.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time as well, Krish. And
Yeah,
for
thank you.
all the folks who are out there who are looking to, who are looking to switch to product management or are on the lookout for, a move from one company to the other, we are
Yeah,
partnering with so what you can do to actually access this services, which is essentially resume screening and feedback services, the listing of all the top jobs in the product management space, and also personal finance management, is that you can join our Slack channel on TPF, and you'll be able to get access to all of these. Trying our best to get as many product managers out there in the market as we can, so that India itself develops as a very you know big product nation as such, right? But yeah, thank you so much for your time, Krish. I really wish we had more time to listen more to you. But yeah, thank you so much for your
Thank
time,
you.
and yeah, you have a fantastic day ahead. And
Thanks so much.
folks,
Thank you. Thanks
please
for
feel free to
thanks
stay
everyone for.
and network with everybody else here. Yeah,
Excellent. Hey, thank you, Akash. I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you. Right. Really enjoyed the conversation and the questions. I'm really sorry we have a lot of questions, but feel free to hit me on email or Twitter. I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Krish.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Krish.
yeah. Thank you.
Do we just close and go, or do we go to
Akash,
lunch?
what's it up? Akash, you see the
Yeah, I can end the session. Alan, you. Yeah. The only reason I'm not ending the session is because with AirMeet, I'm not sure. Will it allow other folks to network who are in here?
no,
Or
no, no. Once you click end session,
um,
the 99 folks will
yeah,
be
I'm going to end
there.
the session. Yeah, sure. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Krish. Thanks, Nitin, for actually jumping in. And thanks for
Yeah, sure.
helping us get to it. Wouldn't have happened without you. Thank you so much. Thanks, Alan. Thanks,
Anytime,
Suhas. I
Akash.
wish you would have co-hosted with me. Yeah. Thanks.
We'll do a 2.0 with Kush sometime. Thank you so much, Kush.
Done, done,
Have a
done.
good day.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye.